Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and it's the first week in February. I live in Utah Zone 7, and I wanted to take you along to see if there was anything that I could harvest outdoors in my garden, and then take you indoors and harvest some things that I have been waiting for. Now, the reason I wanted to make this video is to let you know that you can harvest midwinter in cold climates. Now, as I said, I live in Utah Zone 7. This winter has been about average. We had the threat to get into the single digits, but we didn't quite get there. We stayed in the low teens. And most of the days have been in the 30s, except for this last week. This last week has been in the 40s, and I think we even had a day hit the 50s. Every night freezes though, and let's check and see if any of my soil is still frozen. We are slated to have a large storm come through, and it's going to get kind of cold again. It'll go back down into the 30s, and then the nights will hit in the mid to low 20s. And I just wanted to show you what survives and what you can harvest. So let's look at the soil in this garden bed. I've had it covered with straw and grass, and it has thawed. It was frozen solid for a long time, but it looks like it has not frozen again. Now let's look at the soil outside the raised beds. And I'm hitting a layer of frost just below the surface. So the soil in the raised beds is warming a little bit quicker, and we still do have frozen soil down below. But what do we have in here? This is one of my raised beds. I recently covered it. It hasn't been covered the whole winter, but look how gorgeous this kale is. This is just a purple kale. I can't remember the name of it. Maybe it's just a red kale. I don't remember the name, but it is absolutely beautiful. Has leaves that we can harvest, and it probably has a few aphids on it, but that's okay. We'll wash those off. Underneath it, we have some chard. This one on the outside, nearest the outside of the plastic, has received some cold damage, but the one underneath is looking pretty good. So let's take off some leaves of our kale and bring it indoors. So let's harvest some leaves of this kale, and then I will use it for dinner tonight. So there we have a few of the leaves of that purple kale. Absolutely gorgeous. Now I do have to say, this time of year, any of the leaves that I've harvested are not going to be replaced until the spring. And then in the spring, because we've hit a cold winter, this will start flowering. Now the flower stalks are edible, quite delicious. So let's just leave this guy and go find some more stuff to harvest. Now I'm going to need to hurry. It looks like our snowstorm is starting, but I wanted to show you these. Now they're a little worse for wear, but these are my chiji plants that were planted last September. They've been covered in snow, hit temperatures in the teens, and we still have leaves that could be harvested. These have turned out to be extremely, extremely hardy plants. Now this is one of my upper low hoop houses. We've got collards that can be harvested. And if you look down under here, I don't think I'm going to harvest any yet, but we've got some kohlrabi that can also be harvested. The chard that's been covered is doing a lot better, but this little blue ruffled kale is not doing as well as the ones that I have indoors. And so we'll just kind of leave that guy and let him try and grow. I don't know, can you see the snow falling? Snowstorm coming. Got a little bit of cabbage in here that's trying to head up. Got some kohlrabi. And some more chard. We could harvest that. Let's go look at my other hoop houses. I think there's other things we can harvest there. Now this is on the south side of my house. The plants here seem to have done much better. This is my new Vajayga cover that I absolutely love. And it is doing really well. Look at the plants inside here. There's a perfect chiji that can be harvested. We've got some collards that are ready to be harvested. Look at that kohlrabi and the purple cabbages. Now this side over here seems to get a little bit more sun. The cabbages are heading up a lot better. The kohlrabi is headed up really nicely. And then look how gorgeous those purple cabbages are. So let's harvest some chiji and take these indoors. And just like with the kale, these leaves will not grow back until next spring. And that's why I like to grow several different things. Now I do have some kohlrabi. It's really shocking, but I do have some kohlrabi that I had harvested in September that is still good and in my refrigerator. Like I said, this is February. It stores for a long, long time. I'm going to finish eating that, and then I could come out and start harvesting more kohlrabi. And we've got a few little green onions in here, but I've got green onions growing indoors. So let's actually go inside. Maybe I'll come out and harvest some collards tomorrow, but I've got enough food between the kale and the chiji misai that I can have what I wanted to make for dinner tonight. So we're just going to leave this. But it's amazing and fun to be able to harvest vegetables outdoors in February in a snowstorm. Now, I will not be covering these hoop houses tonight. We're not going to get below the mid-20s. I only cover my hoop houses if it's going to get in the low 20s. If we get in the mid-20s, they seem to do fine. Now it's getting cold. There's only one of me, but this is plenty for dinner tonight. So let's go inside since it's snowing and it's cold and start harvesting in my indoor gardens. Now we're back in my grow room, and I'm so glad that I have this room that I can harvest from because it is really cold outside. My fingers are actually a little bit numb now. So let's show you what I have ready to harvest. Now, if you're wondering how I grow these things indoors, what I do, how I make my potting soil, I'll link a playlist up here. It's my indoor gardening playlist, and that will talk a little bit about how I do this. But let's show you today just what I'm harvesting. Now, I actually came in and started my harvest, and that's what made me realize I probably should do a video on this. But I started with my basil. This is just a handful of basil that I cut off at the top of this basil in my Devo hydroponics unit. We've got another tomato growing in here. We've got a little pink celery, and then way back here somewhere we have a ripe tomato. Let's pull that off. But right here we have an ink spot tomato, and I think I saw another one back there. So there we have two ink spot tomatoes. Aren't they gorgeous? They're kind of blurry. Let's put them down and show them to you. Look at that. I love them. They have a great flavor, excellent tomatoes, but those aren't the only tomatoes we can harvest. Now this down here is one of my Golden Harvest cherry tomatoes. It's from Arrow Garden, and I've just been saving the seeds from these. They have gotten quite large. They're supposed to be a really short tomato. Short, kind of like my orange hat over here. We're going to harvest a little off that orange hat in just a minute. But this is producing like crazy. We've got a ton of tomatoes, and some of them are even ripe. So we've got this one right here. I love the flavor of these cherry tomatoes. Then we've got some inside, way down. I don't know if you can see them way down at the bottom. Let's see if we can get to them from here. Look how pretty those are. So here we are, the beginning of February, harvesting tomatoes. There's a ton of them. Let's harvest all the tomatoes that are ready to harvest and see what they look like. Now very quickly, actually, I just remembered before I harvest them, let's talk a little bit about how I grow tomatoes. Right now I'm doing a tomato growing experiment. We've got 4 tomatoes in hydroponic units. Those are 2 orange hats. This is my ink spot that we just harvested. This is another little orange hat. And then we've got tomatoes in various size pots. These are 2-gallon pots with our cherry tomatoes. We actually have a dwarf tomato called Adelaide Festival, and it's a little slower than all of the others. We've got flowers, and I can feel the tomatoes starting to form, but this one's a little bit slower. This is a dwarf tomato, absolutely delicious. I love this tomato, but we're going to get a harvest off of that. And my experiment was to see which way to grow tomatoes was better. Do they grow faster and better in hydroponic units? This is an Arrow Garden. A lot of people say that they grow 4 times faster in hydroponic units than they do in pots. Well, they don't really. I think they're about a week ahead, maybe a week ahead. But we've got tomatoes, little tomatoes here ready to harvest in the hydroponic units. And I just showed you that we had tomatoes ready to harvest in our larger pots. But our smaller pots right here, this is a 1-gallon pot with orange hats in it. And then right here we've got some ink spots. Ink spot, oh, actually we have one ready to harvest. There's an ink spot in a pot that's harvestable the same day as the one in our hydroponic units. So I think that the hype about them growing faster and bigger in hydroponic units is not true. Now I fertilize all of them every 2 weeks with a liquid fertilizer, and in my pots I use Osmocote, which is also a slow release fertilizer. But we've got tons of tomatoes on here. They're about the same size as the ones here, and these are about a week ahead in terms of harvest. So I wait to harvest until they feel a little bit soft. Once they're soft, the flavor is good and you can harvest them. Now let's look at some tomatoes that are in a 4-inch pot and see what they look like. Now I do not recommend growing tomatoes, the dwarf tomatoes, even the micro dwarf tomatoes in 4-inch pots. I just didn't have room or the desire to pot these up. And so I left them in this little 4-inch pot to see what would happen. And look at this. They are fruiting in a 4-inch pot. They're only about half the size of everything else. And the fruit is smaller, but it's starting to ripen. So you can grow them in 4-inch pots, just don't expect a lot of production. Now I've got a lot more tomatoes to harvest, but I don't want to make this a long video. Let's show you what else we can harvest. Down here, we actually have some Swiss chard that is ready to harvest. Just pull that off. Love Swiss chard. So we've got some red Swiss chard. Let's harvest a few more of those. And then in the back there, we have some white Swiss chard, and I'll come back and harvest that a little bit later. We also have our indoor kale. It's getting huge. It's outgrown its enclosure, so I have started more kale to replace this. But in the meantime, we've got kale that can be harvested. So this is my indoor kale, and we're starting to see that's not bug issues. That might be fertilizer issues. Let's check this really closely. See if we can see little bugs. Those look like burn spots, which a lot of time I'm learning is nutrient issues. This is a very large kale to have in a very small pot. This is a 1-gallon pot, and this is probably about a 3-foot tall kale. We've got some blue ruffled kale in the back that can also be harvested. We'll harvest that a little bit later. And then this is the fun one. Let's look under here and see what we have. Look at this. Look at this. I will put the name down on the screen, but I think this is called the China long cucumber. It's a parthenogenic cucumber. Let's harvest this, which means it can grow indoors without a pollinator. So now we have a cucumber that we can harvest. Now I'm a little sad how these have turned out, but we do have something we can harvest here. I was growing peas indoors. My daughter does this so much better than I do. Just have a few that can be harvested. And that plant has pretty much died. But we have 2 peas that we can harvest indoors. I'm not exactly sure what happened to it, but my thought is that it may have gotten too warm. This grow room holds a lot of heat, and with all the lights in here, the temperature stays up above 75, probably about 78 degrees. The rest of my house is around 68 degrees, but I think it stays around 78 degrees in here. And that might be just a little too warm for that plant. But anyway, we've got 2 peas that we can harvest. As I said, my daughter grows peas indoors, and it actually can happen quite well. Let's see what else there is to harvest. We've got more basil. It's starting to flower. I think this is Thai basil. It's looking pretty good. And then we've got another little tiny, not doing so good, Genovese basil that's living with it in the same pot. So we could harvest some of that if we wanted. We've got some perpetual green onions. We can harvest those for a salad. Let's just harvest a few. I like green onions in my salad. Got green onions. We've got some gorgeous dill. Let's take a leaf or two of the dill and harvest that for a salad. We've got some dill. And then, let me show you what's going on over here. This salad, I've gone without eating salad for a little while, so these are beyond ready to harvest. They're starting to flower. We'll harvest as much of that as we can, and then we're going to dump the rest of it in the compost bin because we've got more salads started over here. So this is my new tray of salad, and in about a week, maybe a week and a half, this will also be ready to harvest. We've got more kale, chard, spinach. I'm so happy about my spinach germination. Just about every one cell has germinated. I think there's only 3 cells that didn't germinate. The only thing that didn't germinate in here is my purple ruffled kale. So I've planted some more seeds of that just so that we can have some. I use that as an ornamental outside. We've got some onions. I tried planting some older onions. You know, they were 2 years old. The seeds were 2 years old, and you can see the difference in germination. This is what it looks like when you have new seed. This is what it looks like when you have old seed. So we did plant more. And before I show you my salad, the last thing I want to show you is that I did plant more radishes. I do still have radishes in my refrigerator from the last harvest I did indoors. And we've got a good size antohi pepper. This is going to turn red. Once it's red, we'll harvest that. We've got several more growing. Now my dough hill pepper doesn't seem to have set any fruit yet, but we're gonna wait until that starts setting fruit, and then we'll be able to harvest that too. And this is what we have for our salad. Like I said, I have radishes left over. I'm not going to harvest any more of that. I was tasting it, and a lot of it is bitter right now because it just went too long without being harvested. But these are the leaves that weren't as bitter. So we have a salad. We've got more chard we can harvest. We've got kale we can make food with. We're going to add the onions and the dill to the salad. We've got some peas. Like I said, radishes in the refrigerator. We've got a ton of tomatoes and a cucumber. So this is why I absolutely love growing indoors. Now, I would love to hear if you're in a cold climate and are able to harvest anything this time of year. And if you are harvesting anything, what are you harvesting? I would love to know. And what methods do you use? Do you grow indoors, or do you grow your produce outdoors under cover? So I hope this video was helpful to you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.